Daxamite ships trembled violently upon entering Earth's tumultuous atmosphere, lightning striking their hulls and hurricane winds assaulting their viewports. Captain Jackson Bailey observed the invasion craft descending towards the Amazon rainforest, reflecting on the surprise of humanity when the Daxamites, an advanced spacefaring species, appeared in orbit a decade ago. Initially extending an olive branch, the Daxamite leader, Saha, soon realized the formidable weaponry possessed by humanity. Without warning, the aliens attacked, devastating Earth's orbital defenses and landing invasion forces across the globe. However, their fatal mistake was landing in the Amazon, home to Earth's deadliest creatures and its fiercest human inhabitants. Bailey rallied his soldiers, emphasizing humanity's resilience and determination to defend their planet. They swiftly moved through the jungle, setting traps for Daxamite patrols and utilizing Earth's diverse environments to their advantage. As the Daxamites struggled to adapt to the humans' tactics, they grew frustrated and sought to understand their enemies' resilience. Captured human soldiers underwent intense scrutiny, revealing humanity's remarkable ability to adapt and thrive in any environment, much to the astonishment of the Daxamite scientists. The S-Father absorbed the scientists' findings with growing apprehension. Initially, he had anticipated the invasion of Earth to be straightforward, assuming the humans would swiftly succumb. However, he now grasped the enormity of the challenge ahead. Even if we conquer their planet, he conceded, we may never extinguish their resolve. They'll resist at every turn, utilizing every means at their disposal. We may have underestimated our adversaries. The intelligence stemmed from a captured Daxamite soldier who yielded under the interrogation techniques of Bailey's squad. This alien divulged the existence of a clandestine research facility concealed deep within the Sahara, where the Daxamites conducted sinister experiments on Earth's deadliest creatures. Bailey mobilized his team, resolved to thwart the Daxamites' nefarious schemes. Traversing the scorching sands, their advanced camouflage suits shielded them from both the heat and enemy detection. Approaching the facility, they faced a barrage of laser fire from Daxamite guards, retaliating with modified weapons designed to breach the aliens' advanced armor. Inside, they navigated through a labyrinth of corridors, disabling security systems and hacking into the facility's mainframe for intelligence. What they discovered sent shivers down their spines. The Daxamites had captured a menagerie of Earth's most lethal predators, subjecting them to genetic enhancements. Bailey's squad planted explosives throughout the facility, intending to eradicate the Daxamites' twisted creations. However, as they made their escape, alarms blared and the enhanced predators were unleashed into the corridors. Battling both Daxamite guards and the creatures they sought to destroy, they narrowly fled as the facility erupted in flames behind them. Yet, their triumph was short-lived. Reports flooded in from across the globe, detailing the escape of the enhanced predators, now spreading and adapting with alarming speed. The war took a terrifying turn as mutated creatures wreaked havoc alongside humans and Daxamites, a consequence of the dark science wielded by the Daxamites. Bailey's squad found themselves at the forefront of this new phase, their expertise tested in battles across shattered cities, ocean depths, and skies. Amidst the relentless struggle for survival against both Daxamites and monsters, a new threat loomed from the depths of space. Enormous Zorgan warships, armed with advanced weaponry, descended through Earth's atmosphere. The S-Father, observing his battered and depleted forces, watched the ships approach on the viewscreen. The Zorgan commander hailed the Daxamite flagship, offering assistance in subduing the humans and their formidable world. Suspicion gnawed at the S-Father, but desperation outweighed caution, leading him to accept the offer. The Zorgans wasted no time, shuttling their biotechnology experts to the Daxamite ships. Human DNA harvested from captives was combined with genes from Earth's apex predators, resulting in terrifying hybrid soldiers equipped with advanced weaponry. On the surface, Bailey and his squad fought against the nightmarish creatures unleashed from the Sahara facility. Mutated beasts swarmed the ruins of once great cities, leaving devastation in their wake. Suddenly, a new horror emerged as Zorgan Daxamite hybrids, clad in armored exoskeletons, entered the fray with savage ferocity. Drop pods crashed to Earth, disgorging monstrous creatures genetically engineered for war. The abominations tore into humans and Daxamites alike, overwhelming Bailey's squad. Forced to retreat, they sought refuge in a hidden bunker complex deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, discovering a cache of advanced weapons developed before the invasion. Among the arsenal was a prototype exosuit, designed to enhance the wearer's abilities. Bailey donned the suit, feeling its power surge through him. With their new weapons and equipment, Bailey and his team emerged from the bunker, ready to confront their enemies. The tide of battle turned as Bailey engaged the hybrids, his squad providing support with their enhanced weaponry. However, the war was far from over. Earth had become a battleground, and humanity was determined to fight until the bitter end. As Bailey battled against the hybrids, he intercepted a Zorgan transmission revealing their true intentions. Earth was merely a testing ground for their twisted experiments, and humanity had been played for fools. Determined to stop them, Bailey searched for a solution, realizing that the enemy of his enemy might be their only hope. He initiated communication with the Daxamite flagship, addressing the S-Father. The alien leader's face appeared on the HUD, his expression guarded. "What do you want, human?" the S-Father inquired. "The Zorgans have betrayed you," Bailey asserted. "They're exploiting us all. Earth isn't merely a prize. It's a laboratory for their experiments." He transmitted the intercepted message, watching the S-Father's visage contort with rage as he listened. "I propose a truce," Bailey suggested. "Let's work together to drive the Zorgan from Earth. Then we can settle our own differences." After a prolonged silence, the S-Father reluctantly nodded. "Very well, human. A truce, for now." A joint human Daxamite force was swiftly organized to assault the Zorgan research vessel, while Bailey and a strike team infiltrated the ship to destroy the genetic labs. The assault was relentless, with human and Daxamite soldiers fighting side by side against the Zorgan hordes. Bailey's team battled through the ship's corridors, confronting nightmarish creations along the way. Upon reaching the central lab, they encountered the Zorgan leader, a monstrous chimera of Earth's deadliest creatures. "Welcome, Captain Bailey," it hissed, its voice a chilling chorus. Bailey retorted, "Your little science project ends here." The ensuing battle was fierce, with Bailey and his squad unleashing a barrage of firepower against the abomination. Despite sustaining severe wounds, the Zorgan leader remained relentless. Bailey, fueled by defiance, plunged his energy blades into its neck, finally bringing it down. However, their victory was short-lived as the ship's power core destabilized, prompting a hasty retreat. Escaping in escape pods, they witnessed the Zorgan vessel's destruction, but tensions resurfaced in the aftermath. While grateful for human aid, factions among the Daxamites remained divided over Earth's fate. General Zahn, a ruthless hardliner, seized control, sparking clashes with rebel Daxamites and human resistance. Bailey and his squad found themselves entrenched in the midst of battle, relying on their exosuits and advanced weaponry to survive amidst the chaos. A distress call from a remote human settlement in the Amazon alerted them to an unexpected threat, not from Daxamites, but from Zorgans. Surviving Zorgan geneticists had taken refuge in the rainforest, utilizing its biodiversity to create a new army of abominations. Gathering his squad, comprised of both humans and rebel Daxamites, Bailey loaded them up with weapons and supplies before boarding a transport bound for the Amazon. As they flew over the lush canopy, Bailey couldn't shake the sense of impending doom. Touching down at the settlement, they were greeted by weary settlers, who spoke of creatures lurking in the jungle, abominations blending Earth's deadliest predators with Zorgan intelligence. Determined to stop the Zorgans and their twisted experiments, Bailey and his squad plunged into the jungle, ready to confront whatever nightmares awaited them. Moving swiftly through the undergrowth, they encountered monstrous creatures, armored jaguars, venomous bullet ants, bloodthirsty vampire bats, all products of the Zorgans' genetic manipulation. With resolve etched on their faces, Bailey and his squad fought their way through the abominations, determined to put an end to the Zorgans' reign of terror in the heart of darkness. Their weapons' fire reverberated through the dense foliage, but amidst battling the mutated beasts, a new threat emerged from the shadows. Figures darted through the trees, their movements too swift and agile to be entirely human. Clad in tattered remnants of traditional tribal garb, their bodies were grotesquely altered, fused with alien technology and traits of jungle predators. "The tribes," Bailey breathed, realizing the Zorgans had corrupted them. The transformed tribespeople attacked with ferocity, wielding primitive weapons enhanced with Zorgan tech, spears crackling with energy, blow darts loaded with flesh-eating nanites. The strike force found themselves fighting on two fronts, against both mutated wildlife and Zorgan-altered tribes. They pressed forward, inch by bloody inch, the jungle floor strewn with the bodies of friend and foe alike. Finally, they reached the heart of the Zorgan encampment, an eerie mass of organic and metallic structures pulsing with sickly bioluminescence. At its center stood the artifact, a towering monolith of alien metal etched with swirling glyphs. Dr. Zex, the lead Zorgan scientist, confronted them, his body a grotesque amalgamation of human, organ, and animal traits. "You're too late," Zex hissed, proclaiming his intent to reshape the world. Bailey stepped forward, his exosuit humming with power. "Not on my watch, you freak." The battle erupted, the strike force clashing with Zex's elite guard of Zorgan tribal hybrids. In the chaos, Zex lunged for the artifact, triggering a blinding surge of energy that engulfed the battlefield. When Bailey's vision cleared, he witnessed the jungle transforming. Trees contorting, vines lashing out like tentacles, and mutated beasts' cries echoing from every direction. Determined to stop the artifact's malevolent influence, Bailey rallied the survivors to push forward. They faced a jungle now bent on their destruction, a living nightmare fueled by Zorgan science. Bailey lunged at Dr. Zex, their weapons clashing amidst the chaos. The artifact pulsed with energy, warping the landscape into a nightmarish realm. "You're too late, human," Zex snarled, his voice a blend of organic and mechanical tones. But Bailey remained resolute, determined to prevent Zex from reshaping the world in his image. Activating his suit's thrusters, he propelled himself towards the Zorgan scientist. They grappled amidst a whirlwind of blades and claws, the artifact's energy swirling around them like a maelstrom. Meanwhile, in the war-torn cities, Zaun's forces and the Daxamite rebels faced a new onslaught of mutated horrors. Creatures that once inhabited the Amazon now prowled the streets, their twisted forms adapted to the urban environment. In the heart of the Amazon, Raxon and his team raced against time to reverse the artifact's effects. They pored over ancient alien texts, seeking clues to the device's workings. "I think I've got something," Raxon exclaimed as he deciphered a series of glyphs. "The artifact is designed to adapt, but there's a way to reset it, to restore the original ecosystem." Back at the artifact site, Bailey and Dr. Zex continued their brutal duel. Dr. Zex's body had become a monstrous fusion of flesh and machine, tendrils snaking out from the artifact to envelop him. Despite his battered exosuit, Bailey refused to yield. With a final desperate lunge, he plunged his energy blade into the heart of the artifact, even as Dr. Zex's claws raked across his armor. The artifact shuddered, emitting a blinding pulse of energy. Dr. Zex screamed as the tendrils binding him withered and died, his mutated form crumbling to dust. But the battle was far from over. The artifact, though damaged, continued to pulse with power, and the mutated jungle closed in around them. Knowing that failure was not an option, Bailey and his allies braced themselves for the battles to come. They would fight to their last breath to save their world, no matter the cost. Bailey's exosuit sparked and sputtered as he grappled with Dr. Zex, the artifact's power surging through the scientist's body, warping him into a nightmarish abomination. With a roar of fury, Bailey slammed his fist into Dr. Zex's distorted face, the impact sending shockwaves through the exosuit's frame. As the artifact's energy spiraled out of control, Bailey knew that the only way to stop it was to overload it, potentially sacrificing himself and everything else in the area. At that moment, Rexon and his team arrived on the scene, a hastily constructed device clutched in the Daxamite scientist's hands. Rexon explained breathlessly that the device could reverse the mutations, but it needed to be connected directly to the artifact to work. Bailey didn't hesitate. He volunteered to stay behind to manually connect Rexon's device to the artifact while the others evacuated the area. He knew it was a one-way trip, but there was no other choice. As Rexon and the others retreated, Bailey fought his way through the mutating jungle, relying on his exosuit's enhanced strength and speed to stay alive. The once familiar rainforest had become a surreal nightmare, filled with twisted creatures that had once been his allies and enemies alike. Despite the danger, he reached the artifact, its surface pulsing with uncontrolled energy. With shaking hands, Bailey began the process of connecting Rexon's device, the exosuit systems interfacing with the ancient technology. But as he worked, a horde of mutated Zorgans emerged from the jungle, their bodies warped and twisted by the artifact's power. At their head was Dr. X, his form hideously transformed. Bailey met their charge head-on, the exosuit's energy blades flashing as he fought to hold them back in a brutal, desperate battle. With the artifact's destruction, the mutations began to reverse, but the cost was high. Bailey stood amidst the devastation, his body battered and broken, the earth blackened and sterile. Despite the sacrifices made and the scars left upon the world, there was no time to grieve. The war still raged on, and every moment wasted meant more lives lost. They began discussing peace, ways to rebuild and coexist. But even as the words of truth passed their lips, the roar of plasma fire split the air. Rogue Daxamite soldiers poured into the square, weapons blazing, led by Strode Karox, his face twisted with fanatical rage. "Traitors!" Karox bellowed, leveling his rifle at the Sire Father. "You would surrender to these primitives, betray our destiny of conquest." General Zahn leapt to his feet, drawing his sidearm. "Stand down, Karox. The war is over," he commanded. But Karox's followers opened fire, plasma bolts stitching the air. The Sire Father's guards fell, their armor smoldering, as Karox lunged forward, seizing the Sire Father by the throat. "Your weakness ends here," Karox snarled. "I will lead our people to glory, even if I must cut a path through traitor flesh." Suddenly, a hail of gunfire erupted from the surrounding buildings. Bailey and a mixed force of human and loyalist Daxamite soldiers surged into the square, weapons spitting death. They intercepted Karox's attack, racing to head off the rogue faction. A fierce battle erupted, plasma bolts and bullets crisscrossing the rubble-strewn ground. Bailey led the charge, his rifle barking in staccato bursts as he dove from cover to cover, taking down Karox's soldiers with pinpoint shots. But Karox was already retreating, dragging the Sire Father with him. The rogue commander hurled a grenade, the blast sending Bailey sprawling. By the time the smoke cleared, Karox and his prize had vanished into the warren of ruined streets. Bailey staggered to his feet, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. He turned to his squad, humans and Daxamites united by a common cause. "Fan out and find them," he barked. "We can't let Karox reignite this war." With the fate of the Sire Father and the fragile peace at stake, Bailey and Zahn cast aside their long-standing animosity. They hastily assembled a rescue team of their most skilled fighters, both human and Daxamite. Zahn's insider knowledge of Daxamite tactics combined with Bailey's gritty combat experience made them a formidable duo. The team tracked Karox's rogue forces to an abandoned military base deep in the war-torn countryside. The compound's crumbling concrete walls and rusting barbed wire stood as grim reminders of the conflict's toll. Bailey and Zahn led the charge, breaching the perimeter with explosive charges. As they fought their way into the base, the true horror of Karox's plans became clear. Twisted genetic abominations, the remnants of Zorgan experiments, lurched out of the shadows. Daxamite soldiers, their bodies warped by mutagenic serums, attacked with unnatural ferocity. "Karox has gone mad," Zahn snarled, gunning down one of the hulking beasts that had once been one of his own troops. "He's trying to create an army of monsters." Bailey ducked under a slashing claw, putting a burst of fire into a mutant's misshapen skull. "We have to find the Sire Father before it's too late." They pushed deeper into the base, the rescue team's weapons blazing. Every step was hard-fought, every corridor a gauntlet of horrors. Finally, they located the Sire Father in a dank cell, his body battered but his spirit unbroken. As they freed the Daxamite leader from his bonds, a chilling laugh echoed through the compound. Karox stepped from the shadows, his body rippling with unnatural musculature. He had injected himself with a potent strain of the Zorgan mutagen, transforming into a monstrous parody of life. "You're too late," Karox gloated, his voice a guttural rasp. "The age of the Daxamite Empire is at hand, and I will lead us to glory." He lunged at the rescue team, his claws ripping through metal and flesh alike. Bailey and Zahn met his charge head-on, their weapons roaring. The battle was brutal, a whirlwind of slashing talons and searing plasma. Bailey cried out as Karox's claws found their mark, shredding through his armor and into the flesh beneath. Zahn leapt to his ally's defense, engaging Karox in a furious duel. With a final desperate lunge, Zahn plunged his energy blade into Karox's twisted heart. The abomination let out a gurgling howl, its lifeblood sizzling on the deck. Karox's reign of terror was over, but the cost had been high. As the rescue team fought their way out of the crumbling base, supporting a badly wounded Bailey and the weakened Sire Father, a grim realization settled over them. Karox's mad ambitions were not an isolated incident but part of a larger conspiracy. Within the Daxamite military, factions within the command structure sought to undermine the truce with humanity and claim Earth for themselves. The war, it seemed, was far from over. Bailey and Zahn strode into the makeshift conference room, their faces grim with resolve. The Sire Father and a contingent of human leaders looked up as they entered, the tension palpable in the air. "We have uncovered a conspiracy within the Daxamite military," Bailey announced, his voice steady. "A faction that seeks to undermine the peace we have fought so hard to achieve." Zahn stepped forward, his eyes meeting those of the Sire Father. "CRRA Vox's actions were not those of a lone madman," he said. "He had support from within our own ranks." The Sire Father's expression hardened. "This is troubling news indeed," he said. "We must root out this corruption before it can destroy all that we have built." The human leaders nodded in agreement. "We will provide whatever assistance we can," one of them said. "Our people have suffered enough from this war." Bailey and Zahn spent the next few days poring over the evidence they had gathered, piecing together the extent of the conspiracy. They compiled a list of suspects, high-ranking Daxamite officers who had been in communication with Karox before his final stand. But even as they worked, reports began to filter in of attacks on both human and Daxamite targets. Military outposts were hit, supply lines disrupted, and civilians caught in the crossfire. Bailey and Zahn were called before the joint leadership once again. "These attacks bear the hallmarks of the conspirators," the Sire Father said. "We need you to lead a task force to hunt them down and bring them to justice." The two warriors nodded, their eyes hardening with determination. They handpicked a team of the best fighters from both races, humans and Daxamites united in purpose. As they tracked the conspirators' movements, a pattern began to emerge. The attacks were not random but rather carefully coordinated to destabilize key strategic locations. The trail led them to the ruins of a once great human city, a sprawling wasteland of crumbling skyscrapers and rusting infrastructure. Deep within this maze of debris, they discovered a hidden Daxamite research facility, its existence carefully concealed from the outside world. Bailey and Zahn led their team in a daring infiltration, breaching the facility's defenses and fighting their way through the corridors. The conspirators had been busy creating a new generation of genetically enhanced soldiers, using the perfected Zorgan mutagen. The battle was brutal, a close-quarters nightmare of flashing blades and searing plasma. Bailey's team fought with grim determination, cutting down the enhanced soldiers one by one. At the heart of the facility, they confronted the mastermind behind the conspiracy, a twisted Daxamite scientist named Dr. Zeeth. The doctor's eyes gleamed with madness as he revealed his ultimate plan to unleash the mutagen on a global scale, transforming the Earth's population into a race of subservient slaves. "Too late," Dr. Zeeth cackled, his fingers hovering over a control panel. "With a single command, I will reshape this world in my image." Bailey and Zahn exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They had come too far to let this madman succeed. As one, they charged forward, weapons blazing, ready to face whatever horrors Dr. Zeeth had in store for them. The fate of two races hung in the balance, and failure was not an option. Bailey and Zahn charged forward, weapons blazing, as they fought their way through the maze of corridors. The genetically enhanced soldiers fell before their onslaught, but more kept coming, an endless tide of twisted flesh and advanced weaponry. Finally, they burst into the central chamber where Dr. Zeeth stood before a towering tank filled with bubbling luminescent fluid. The mad scientist whirled to face them, his eyes gleaming with malevolent glee. "Ah, you're too late," he crowed. "Behold the apex." With a hiss of hydraulics, the tank opened, and a monstrous form emerged. It was a nightmarish fusion of the galaxy's deadliest predators. With the razor-sharp claws of a Zorgan ripper, the impenetrable scales of a Daxamite war beast, and the regenerative capabilities of a Terran hydra. The apex let out a deafening roar and charged, its massive form shaking the ground with each thunderous step. Bailey and Zahn opened fire, but their weapons seemed to have no effect, the creature's hide absorbing the energy blasts effortlessly. The apex tore into their ranks, its claws rending flesh and bone. Soldiers screamed as they were flung aside, their bodies broken and bleeding. Bailey and Zahn fought desperately, trying to draw the creature's attention away from their battered troops, but it was no use. The apex was an unstoppable juggernaut, shrugging off their attacks and dealing devastating blows in return. Bailey cried out in pain as a razor-sharp claw raked across his chest, his armor barely holding against the onslaught. "Fall back," Zahn roared, firing a volley of plasma grenades that exploded harmlessly against the apex's hide. "We can't stop it." In the chaos of the battle, Dr. Zeeth slipped away, a triumphant smile on his face as he clutched a small vial in his hand, the perfected mutagen that would bring the galaxy to its knees. Bailey and Zahn retreated, their forces in tatters, watching helplessly as the Apex rampaged through the facility, destroying everything in its path. The once proud strike team limped back to their transports, nursing their wounds and mourning their fallen comrades. But even as they tended to their injuries, Bailey and Zahn knew that they couldn't give up. Dr. Zeeth was still out there, and with the Apex under his control, no one was safe. They rallied their remaining troops, a ragtag mix of humans and Daxamites united by grim determination. They would hunt Dr. Zeeth to the ends of the earth and beyond if necessary. The pursuit was long and bloody, a series of desperate battles against Dr. Zeeth's enhanced soldiers and the Apex itself. Each time they faced the monstrous creature, it seemed to have grown stronger, its hide more resistant to their weapons, its regenerative powers more potent. But Bailey and Zahn refused to give up. They fought with everything they had, improvising new tactics and weapons to counter the Apex's ever-evolving abilities. As they chased Dr. Zeeth across the war-torn landscape, they began to uncover a disturbing pattern. The mad scientist wasn't just fleeing from them. He was gathering resources, raiding abandoned military bases and research facilities for advanced technology and genetic samples. During one of these raids, they discovered the truth. They intercepted a communication between Dr. Zeeth and a Daxamite warlord named Zorx, a ruthless conqueror who commanded a vast fleet of warships. Dr. Zeeth wasn't just planning to conquer Earth. He was preparing for a full-scale invasion of the galaxy. With the perfected mutagen and an army of apex creatures at his command, he would be unstoppable. And Zorx, with his mighty armada, would be the key to crushing any resistance. The warlord's ships were already on their way, a looming threat that hung over the galaxy like a sword of Damocles. Bailey and Zahn looked at each other, the weight of this revelation sinking in. They had always known that the stakes were high, but now they realized just how far Dr. Zeeth was willing to go. The fate of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy, rested on their shoulders. They had to halt Dr. Zeeth and his Apex, find a way to thwart the impending invasion before it became irreversible. Yet, as they embarked once more, racing against time to intercept the mad scientist, they couldn't shake the ominous feeling of walking into a trap. Dr. Zeeth had proven himself a cunning adversary, always a step ahead, with the Apex growing stronger by the day. The odds seemed daunting, but they had no alternative. They had to persevere, to press on, no matter the toll. If they faltered, if Dr. Zeeth's schemes succeeded, it wouldn't solely be Earth suffering. The entire galaxy would fall under the reign of the Apex, a nightmare without escape. In a frozen bunker beneath the Siberian tundra, Bailey and Zahn strategized around a tactical display, their breath visible in the frigid air. The holographic projection illuminated Dr. Zeeth's compound, a heavily fortified stronghold armed with advanced weaponry and genetically enhanced soldiers. "We need to strike swiftly and decisively," Bailey asserted, his gaze fixed on the compound's formidable defenses. "If we allow him to deploy those drones, it's game over." Zahn concurred gravely. "Agreed. My team will infiltrate Zorx's fleet and sabotage his ships. We'll buy you as much time as possible." With a united clasp of forearms, the two former adversaries cemented their alliance, then parted ways to prepare for battle. Bailey rallied his diverse team of soldiers, humans and Daxamites alike, battle-hardened and resolute. "Gear up," he commanded. "We move out in 5. The assault on Dr. Zeeth's compound unfolded relentlessly. Bailey's team faced a barrage of laser fire and explosions, the genetically enhanced soldiers proving formidable adversaries. But with their own enhancements from reverse-engineered Zorgan exosuit technology, they fought their way through the outer defenses and engaged Dr. Zeeth's personal guard in fierce close-quarters combat. Amidst the chaos, a terrifying roar reverberated through the compound as the Apex emerged, a behemoth in the corridor. Bailey watched in horror as it shrugged off their most potent weapons, its regenerative abilities defying their assaults. Then, a flash of inspiration struck. Fall back and lure it into the central chamber. Leading the Apex deeper into the compound, they burst into the vast central chamber, filled with towering tanks of glowing mutagen. Dr. Zeeth's shock and rage were palpable as Bailey's team unleashed a volley of shots, rupturing the tanks and flooding the chamber with sickly green glow. As the Apex charged forward, the mutagen's effects took hold, causing its flesh to warp and mutate uncontrollably. Dr. Zeeth's horror was evident as his creation turned against him, twisted by its own adaptive nature. But the mutagen's impact wasn't confined to the Apex alone. The compound structure began to disintegrate, walls and floors dissolving into sludge under its corrosive influence. Bailey and his team sprinted for the exit, evading falling debris and patches of corrosive mutagen. They burst into the frigid Siberian air, the compound collapsing behind them in a tumult of mutagen and twisted metal. Turning to witness, Bailey observed the apex's mutated form crushed beneath the rubble, its regenerative abilities finally overwhelmed. However, there was no time for celebration. Dr. Zeeth had eluded them in the chaos, and the status of the mutagen formula remained uncertain. Though they had emerged victorious in battle, the war was still far from its conclusion. Trudging through the snow, Bailey's calm crackled to life. It was Zon, his voice strained and breathless. "Bailey, we have a problem," he said urgently. "Zor's fleet is on the move. They're headed for Earth, and they're armed to the teeth." Bailey's heart sank at the dire news. It seemed Zorks had outmaneuvered them all along. The invasion was already underway, and Earth faced greater peril than ever before. Glancing at his team, exhausted but resolute, he knew they couldn't afford to give up now. Earth needed them, and they would fight relentlessly to defend it. With determination, Bailey activated his comms on. "We're on our way," he declared. "Hold the line as long as you can. We'll be there soon, and we'll take the fight to Zorks himself if necessary." With that, Bailey and his team embarked across the frozen wasteland, their destination nothing less than the stars themselves. The fate of the galaxy hung precariously, and they alone possessed the power to tip the scales in Earth's favor. Meanwhile, aboard Zorks' flagship, Zon's strike team battled through the corridors, facing off against Daxamite soldiers with relentless determination. Zon methodically placed charges on critical ship systems as they advanced, his resolve unwavering. Upon reaching the bridge, Zon confronted Zorks, their confrontation sparking with intensity. Despite Zorks' taunts, Zon fought with the strength of one determined to right past wrongs and protect his newfound allies. In a decisive move, Zon vanquished Zorks, but the warlord's parting words revealed a truth that would reshape everything. A revelation that demanded urgent discussion with Bailey. As he raced through the corridors of the flagship, Zon's heart pounded with the weight of newfound knowledge and the urgency of the task ahead. Clutching the detonator tightly in his hand, explosions rocked the ship, alarms blaring and the deck buckling beneath his feet. "Fall back to the escape pods," he shouted over the chaos, his team engaging in a desperate rear-guard action. They barely made it, leaping into the pods just as the charges detonated, the flagship disintegrating behind them in a cascade of secondary explosions. Through the viewports, Zon watched as Zor's fleet erupted into flames. The warlord's dreams of conquest turned to ashes. But there was no time for celebration. The revelation of the Daxamite's role in seeding Earth with life weighed heavily on Zon's mind. He had to warn Bailey, had to share this shocking truth. As the escape pods hurtled through the atmosphere towards the rendezvous point, Bailey awaited their arrival, his own team battered but victorious. Zon stepped out, his expression grim. "Bailey, there's something you need to know," he began, recounting everything. Zor's final words, the Daxamite Empire's ancient experiments, and the truth about humanity's origins. Bailey listened, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. "All this time," he said softly, "we thought we were fighting for our world, but it was never really ours to begin with." With heavy hearts, they returned to the Sire Father and the human leaders, who listened somberly to their report. The Sire Father bowed his head, offering a deep apology on behalf of his people for the crimes of their ancestors. The human leaders accepted the offer of partnership, albeit cautiously, emphasizing the autonomy and independence of the human race. In the days that followed, an uneasy peace settled over Earth, with Bailey and Zon hailed as heroes by both sides. However, their work was far from over. Tasked with leading a joint expedition to uncover the truth behind the ancient Daxamite genetic experiments, they prepared for a long and perilous journey. The expedition ship rose from the launch pad, Bailey and Zon taking their seats on the bridge, ready to face the unknown together. As the ship tore through the atmosphere, leaving Earth behind, Bailey and Zon stood on the bridge, watching the stars streak by. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The universe would never be the same again. The weight of their mission settled heavily on their shoulders, with the fate of not just Earth, but countless other worlds hanging in the balance. Dr. Lyra Sorix, a brilliant Daxamite geneticist, approached them, her eyes alight with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "I've been studying the Genesis Initiative for decades," she said, her voice low and urgent. The Daxamite Empire's genetic manipulation of Earth was just the beginning. They seeded life on countless worlds, guiding their evolution to create the perfect species. Bailey's brow furrowed, the implications of Dr. Sorix's words sinking in. Perfect for what? He asked. That's what we need to find out, Zorgan replied, his gaze fixed on the star-studded expanse before them. The ship dropped out of hyperspace, the distant sun of an uncharted system filling the view screen. They had arrived at the coordinates Dr. Sorix had provided, the location of an ancient Daxamite research outpost. As they descended through the planet's atmosphere, Bailey couldn't shake the feeling of unease that crept up his spine. The surface was a desolate wasteland, the ruins of a vast underground complex barely visible beneath the shifting sands. The expedition team, a diverse mix of human and Daxamite scientists, soldiers and explorers, disembarked from the ship, their equipment at the ready. They approached the entrance to the complex, a yawning maw of darkness that seemed to swallow the light. Be on your guard, Zorgan warned as they stepped inside, the beams of their flashlights cutting through the gloom. We don't know what we'll find down here. The complex was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, the walls lined with advanced technology and genetic laboratories that had lain dormant for millennia. Dr. Sorix's eyes widened as she took in the sight, her fingers tracing over the ancient consoles. This is incredible, she breathed. The knowledge contained here could revolutionize our understanding of genetics and evolution. But as they pressed deeper into the complex, the expedition triggered an automated security system. The dust-covered machines sprung to life with a low, ominous hum, a swarm of robotic guardians emerging from hidden alcoves. The team opened fire, their weapons spitting bursts of plasma and projectiles, but the robotic horde seemed to adapt to their tactics with each passing moment. They're learning, Bailey shouted over the din of battle, his exosuit straining to deflect the hail of energy beams. We need to find a way to shut them down. Zorgan's eyes narrowed as he studied the robotic swarm, his mind racing. They must be controlled by a central AI, he said, ducking behind a crumbling pillar. If we can locate and deactivate it, we might be able to stop them. But even as they fought their way through the complex, Bailey and Zorgan knew that time was running out. If the central AI managed to alert the other Genesis Initiative outposts to their presence, they would have the full might of ancient Daxamite technology arrayed against them. It was a race against the clock, a desperate battle to uncover the secrets of the Genesis Initiative before the galaxy itself turned against them. And as they plunged deeper into the heart of the complex, Bailey couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of a discovery that would change everything they thought they knew about the universe. Dr. Sorix's fingers flew across the holographic interface, lines of code scrolling past at breakneck speed. I've got a plan, she said, her eyes never leaving the display. If I can hack into the AI's mainframe and introduce a virus, we might be able to cause it to self-destruct. Bailey and Zorgan exchanged a glance. What's the catch? Bailey asked, his rifle still smoking from the last wave of robotic guardians. The mainframe is located in a heavily guarded central chamber deep within the heart of the complex, Dr. Sorix replied. The only way to access it is to fight our way through. Zorgan nodded grimly. Then that's what we'll do. Bailey and I will lead a strike team to the chamber. The rest of you work on distracting those robotic bastards and sabotaging the power systems. The team split up, each group heading towards their assigned objectives. Bailey and Zorgan's strike team fought their way through the winding corridors, their weapons spitting fire as they battled wave after wave of increasingly powerful robots. As they pushed deeper into the complex, Bailey noticed something strange. The robots seemed to be adapting to their tactics, anticipating their moves, and upgrading their own capabilities to counter them. The AI is studying us, he realized aloud. It's learning from our every move. Zorgan cursed under his breath. This isn't just a security system, he said. It's a highly advanced, self-aware entity. It's been evolving and learning for centuries. The strike team redoubled their efforts, knowing that time was running out. They breached the central chamber only to find themselves face to face with the AI's physical avatar, a towering mechanized behemoth bristling with an array of deadly weapons. Bailey and Zorgan engaged the avatar in a furious battle, dodging its attacks and striking at its weak points. On the other side of the complex, Dr. Sorix worked frantically to upload the virus into the mainframe. Her hand shook as she typed, sweat beading on her forehead. The rest of the team fought desperately to keep the robotic guardians at bay, their weapons overheating and their energy reserves dwindling. Just as the avatar was about to overwhelm Bailey and Zorgan, Dr. Sorix let out a triumphant shout. It's in. The virus is uploading. The AI began to malfunction, its processes corrupted, and its guardians falling into disarray. Bailey and Zorgan seized the opportunity, launching a final desperate assault on the Avatar. With a deafening explosion, the Avatar collapsed, its mechanical body shattering into 1,000 pieces. The AI's control over the complex was crippled, its robotic minions going offline one by one. As the dust settled, the expedition team regrouped in the central chamber, battered and exhausted but victorious. With the AI defeated and the outpost secured, they began to explore the ancient laboratories, uncovering a trove of data and technology related to the Genesis Initiative. What they found sent chills down their spines. Earth was just one of dozens of worlds seeded by the ancient Daxamites, each one an experiment in guided evolution and genetic manipulation. The implications were staggering, the scope of the project almost beyond comprehension. Bailey and Zorgan pored over the trove of data recovered from the Genesis Initiative outpost, their eyes widening as they uncovered the true scope of the ancient Daxamite experiments. Dr. Sorix worked tirelessly beside them, her brilliant mind piecing together the fragments of information into a cohesive whole. "This is incredible," she breathed, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. The Genesis Initiative wasn't just seeding life on a few planets. They were manipulating the evolutionary paths of dozens, if not hundreds, of worlds. As they delved deeper into the data, Dr. Sorix stumbled upon a series of encrypted files, their contents heavily protected. She worked for hours to break through the layers of security, her brow furrowed in concentration. When she finally succeeded, a gasp escaped her lips. "By the stars," she whispered. The Daxamites encountered another alien race during their experiments, a species with technology that rivaled, if not surpassed, their own. She brought up a series of images and log entries detailing the Daxamites' interactions with this mysterious species, which they called the Valyrians. It seems the Valyrians were opposed to the Genesis Initiative from the beginning. They saw the Daxamites' genetic manipulations as a violation of the natural order and an affront to life itself. Bailey and Zorgan exchanged a worried glance. If the Valyrians had tried to stop the Genesis Initiative once before, it was likely they would try again if they learned of the expedition's mission. Dr. Sorix continued to sift through the data, her eyes widening with each new revelation. "I found the map," she said at last, her voice trembling with excitement. "It shows the locations of the Genesis Initiative's research stations, each one focused on a specific aspect of genetic manipulation." She met Bailey and Zorgan's gazes, a fire burning in her eyes. "We have to follow this map to uncover the full truth behind the Genesis Initiative and the Valyrians. We may be the only ones who can prevent a conflict that could engulf the entire galaxy." Bailey and Zorgan nodded, their determination matching her own. They set course for the next research station, their hearts filled with a sense of purpose and trepidation. But as they traveled through the uncharted regions of space, a sudden blast rocked their ship. Alarms blared as the expedition found themselves surrounded by a fleet of unknown starships, their sleek, angular designs unlike anything they had seen before. The ships opened fire without warning, their weapons slicing through the expedition's shields like a blade through paper. Bailey and Zorgan pushed their ship's engines to the limit, weaving and dodging through the onslaught of energy beams. "It has to be the Valyrians," Zorgan shouted over the chaos. "They must have found out about our mission, about the map." The rest of the expedition fleet scattered, trying to evade the relentless pursuers, but the enemy ships were too fast, too advanced. One by one, the expedition's vessels fell, consumed by the bright flashes of exploding reactors. Bailey watched in horror as Dr. Sorix's ship took a direct hit, its hull buckling under the assault. He opened a comm channel, desperate to reach her. "Lyra, you have to get out of there. Your ship can't take much more." But Dr. Sorix's voice came back, calm and resolute. "There's no time, Bailey. The data, the map, everything we've discovered. It's too important to lose." Bailey's heart clenched as he realized what she intended to do. "No, Lyra, don't." But it was too late. Dr. Sorix's ship veered sharply, placing itself between Bailey and Zorgan's vessel and the brunt of the Valyrian assault. The enemy fire intensified, focusing on her crippled ship. "I'm transmitting the data to you now," Dr. Sorix said, her voice steady even as warning lights flashed around her. "Promise me you'll see this through. Promise me you'll uncover the truth." Bailey swallowed hard, his eyes stinging. "I promise, Lyra. We won't let your sacrifice be in vain." A sad smile flickered across Dr. Sorix's face. "It's been an honor, Bailey. Now go before it's too late." The data transmission completed just as a final devastating volley slammed into Dr. Sorix's ship. Bailey and Zakon watched helplessly as the vessel erupted into a brilliant fireball, the shockwave buffeting their own ship. Grief and rage warred within Bailey's heart, but he pushed the emotions aside. He gunned the engines, taking advantage of the momentary gap in the enemy's formation. With a final burst of speed, they broke through the Valyrian lines, escaping into the depths of space. But even as they fled, Bailey knew that their mission had just become infinitely more complicated. The Valyrians were resolute in their determination to conceal the secrets of the Genesis Initiative, to bury the truth of the Daxamite's experiments. They had just made it clear that they would stop at nothing to achieve that goal. With their ships battered and their hearts heavy from the loss of Dr. Sorix and so many brave crewmates, Bailey and Zahn limped into the nearest friendly outpost. The surviving expedition members set to work on repairs, patching hull breaches and coaxing strained engines back to life. As they worked, a coded transmission came through on a secure channel. Bailey and Zahn huddled around the console, their eyes widening as they deciphered the message. It was from one of the captured crew members, revealing that they were being held on a heavily fortified prison planet deep in enemy space. "They say they've uncovered information about the alien race," Zahn said, his voice tight with tension. "Something about their connection to the Genesis Initiative." Bailey's jaw tightened. "We have to get them out. It'll be a suicide mission," Zahn warned. "That prison planet is locked down tighter than a Zorgan's ass. We can't leave them behind." Bailey's eyes hardened with resolve. "Not after everything we've been through together." They gathered a strike team of their most skilled fighters and infiltrators, volunteers who knew the risks but refused to abandon their comrades. As they prepared for the mission, checking weapons and reviewing intel, Bailey couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Their fears were confirmed as they approached the prison planet. A massive enemy fleet dropped out of hyperspace, weapons hot and shields raised. The ships formed a blockade around the planet, cutting off any chance of escape. It was a setup. "They knew we were coming," Zahn growled, his hands flying over the controls. Bailey gritted his teeth as the enemy ships opened fire, pounding against the expedition's shields. "Then we'll just have to fight our way through." The expedition ships scattered, weaving and dodging through the hail of laser fire. They returned fire with everything they had, targeting weak points in the enemy's formation. Fighters launched from both sides, filling the void with darting ships and searing energy beams. Bailey and Zahn's ship took a direct hit, alarms blaring as the shields buckled. They pushed the engines to their limits, racing towards the planet's surface. Enemy fighters swarmed around them, peppering their hull with laser fire. "We're not going to make it," Zahn shouted over the din of battle. "Yes, we are," Bailey said, his voice calm and determined. "Hang on." In a daring maneuver, Bailey sent their ship into a steep dive, plunging towards the planet's surface at breakneck speed. The enemy fighters struggled to keep up, their shots going wide as they tried to match the sudden change in trajectory. Bailey pulled up at the last second, the ship's belly scraping the tops of the prison complex's walls. They had made it past the defenses, but their troubles were far from over. As they touched down in a courtyard, enemy soldiers poured out from every doorway and corridor. The strike team leaped from the ship, weapons blazing, as they fought their way into the complex. The air was filled with the scent of ozone and burnt metal, the sounds of battle echoing through the corridors. Bailey and Zahn fought side by side, their weapons spitting death into the enemy ranks. They pushed forward, their team close behind, searching desperately for any sign of their captured crewmates. But the prison was a maze of corridors and dead ends, each turn revealing more enemy soldiers and automated defenses. The team was forced to split up, taking different paths in an attempt to cover more ground. As Bailey rounded a corner, he found himself face to face with a towering ward droid, its armored chassis bristling with weapons. He dove for cover as the machine opened fire, energy beams scorching the walls and floor. He primed a grenade and lobbed it at the droid, the explosion tearing through its armor and exposing its internal circuitry. With a burst of rifle fire, Bailey finished off the machine, the metal collapsing in a shower of sparks. But there was no time to catch his breath. More soldiers were coming, their boots pounding against the metal floors. Somewhere in this hellish labyrinth, his friends were waiting, counting on him to find them. Bailey reloaded his weapon and pressed on, Zahn and the others fighting their way through other parts of the complex. They had to find their crewmates and get out before the enemy overwhelmed them completely. But with every step, every firefight, Bailey couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that every move they made was playing right into the enemy's hands. It was almost as if they were being herded, drawn deeper into the prison's depths for some sinister purpose. As he ducked into an alcove to avoid another hail of laser fire, Bailey's calm crackled to life. It was Zorgan, his voice strained and breathless. "Bailey, I found them," he said, the sounds of combat nearly drowning out his words. "But we're cut off. We need backup now." Bailey's heart raced as he checked his map, trying to pinpoint Zorgan's location. They were deep in the bowels of the prison now, far from any exit or escape route. He made a split-second decision, knowing that every moment counted. "Hold tight, Zorgan," he said, his voice grim with determination. "I'm on my way." With renewed purpose, Bailey charged forward, his rifle blazing as he cut a path through the enemy forces. He would find Zorgan and the others, and together they would fight their way out of this hellish prison. But even as he fought, Bailey couldn't shake the sense of unease that gripped him. Something about this mission felt wrong, like they were playing right into the enemy's hands. And deep down, he feared that the price of this rescue might be higher than any of them could bear. Bailey and Zorgan fought their way through the prison's dank corridors, the sounds of battle echoing off the metal walls. At last, they reached the cell block where their crewmates were being held. What they found there made their blood run cold. The prisoners huddled in their cells, their bodies twisted and deformed by the Cortex's experiments. Some howled and gibbered like animals, their minds shattered by the horrors they had endured. Others sat in eerie silence, their eyes vacant and lifeless. "Father the stars," Zorgan breathed, his face pale with shock. "What have they done to them? We have to get them out of here." Bailey gritted his teeth, rage and grief warring in his heart. As they began to unlock the cells and help the weakened and traumatized prisoners to their feet, a voice called out from one of the cells. "Wait! Don't leave me behind." Bailey and Zorgan turned to see a Daxamite male, his face gaunt and his eyes haunted, but still burning with a fierce intelligence. They unlocked his cell, helping him to his feet. "I am Dr. Xander Vex," the Daxamite said, his voice hoarse from disuse. "I know what the Cortex are doing here." He leaned heavily on Zorgan, his legs trembling with weakness. "The Cortex are the ones behind the Genesis Initiative," Dr. Vex explained. "They've been manipulating the evolution of species across the galaxy for millennia, trying to create the perfect life forms to serve as their slaves and soldiers." Bailey's heart sank as he listened to the scientist's words. The scope of the Cortex's plans was staggering, the implications horrifying. "They'll stop at nothing to protect their experiments," Dr. Vex warned. "And they've been studying you, the humans, and the Daxamites. They've created hybrid soldiers using your DNA, warriors faster and stronger than anything you've faced before." As if on cue, a new wave of Cortex troops poured into the cell block, their weapons blazing. But these were not the soldiers Bailey and Zorgan had fought before. They moved with blinding speed, their reflexes impossibly fast, their bodies shrugging off wounds that would have felled a lesser being. Bailey and Zorgan returned fire, shielding the prisoners with their own bodies. The battle was brutal and desperate, the Cortex hybrids pressing their advantage. Dr. Vex joined the fight, his own weapon in hand, a look of grim determination on his face. "I've developed a way to reverse the genetic modifications," he shouted over the din of battle. "But we need to get these people to my lab, and we need time to administer the treatment." Bailey nodded, his jaw set. They had to get the prisoners out, had to give them a chance at reclaiming their humanity. He redoubled his efforts, his rifle spitting death into the Cortex ranks. Slowly, painfully, they fought their way back through the prison complex, the prisoners stumbling along behind them. The Cortex forces were relentless, throwing wave after wave of hybrid soldiers at them. But Bailey and Zorgan would not yield. They had come too far, lost too much to fail now. They would get their people out, find a way to stop the Cortex and their twisted experiments, no matter the cost. The fight raged on, the fate of the prisoners and perhaps the fate of the galaxy itself hanging in the balance. As the Cortex soldiers closed in, Bailey and Zorgan fought their way to the prison hangar, blasting through the armored doors with high-yield explosives. Inside, rows of sleek alien ships gleamed under the harsh lights. There, Zorgan pointed to a large transport vessel, its hull emblazoned with the Cortex insignia. "That's our ticket out of here." They raced up the boarding ramp, ushering the weakened prisoners inside. Dr. Vex stumbled, his legs still unsteady from his own genetic modifications, but Bailey caught him, half carrying the scientist to the ship's medbay. In the cockpit, Zahn's fingers flew over the unfamiliar controls, his Daxamite mind quickly adapting to the alien technology. The ship hummed to life, its engines pulsing with power. "Hang on!" Zahn shouted as he punched the thrusters, sending the transport rocketing out of the hangar and into the star-studded void. Almost immediately, alarms blared throughout the ship. The Cortex fleet had detected their escape and was moving to intercept. Energy beams lanced through the darkness, barely missing the transport's hull. "The stealth systems are online," Zahn said, his brow furrowed in concentration. "But we'll need to make a series of jumps through uncharted wormholes to shake them off our tail." Bailey nodded grimly, strapping himself into the co-pilot's seat. "Do what you have to do. We can't let them catch us." Zahn plotted a course through the wormholes, the ship's computer struggling to calculate the complex gravitational anomalies. With a deep breath, he engaged the hyperdrive, sending the transport hurtling into the swirling vortex of the first wormhole. The ship bucked and shuddered as it navigated the twisting corridors of spacetime, strange colors and shapes flashing past the viewports. Each jump took them further into uncharted space, the stars and constellations growing increasingly alien and unfamiliar. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged from the final wormhole, the ship's engines sputtering and overheated. Bailey checked the scanner, his heart pounding in his chest. "No sign of pursuit," he said, relief washing over him. "We did it. We lost them." But their relief was short-lived. As they approached the coordinates of the hidden asteroid base, they realized that it was not as abandoned as they had hoped. The base was surrounded by a fleet of ships, their designs a strange hybrid of Daxamite and alien technology. "Daxamites," Zahn said, his voice tight with tension. "But not like any I've seen before." A hail came over the comm system, the voice harsh and commanding. "Unidentified vessel, you are trespassing in the territory of the Daxamite exiles. Identify yourselves and state your purpose or be destroyed." Bailey and Zahn exchanged a glance, realizing that they had stumbled upon a group of Daxamites who had been living in isolation for centuries, cut off from the rest of their kind. They knew they would have to tread carefully if they hoped to gain the trust and assistance of these outcasts. As the transport ship docked with the base, Bailey and Zahn prepared to face yet another unexpected challenge in their quest to uncover the secrets of the Genesis Initiative. The airlock doors hissed open, revealing a group of armed Daxamites, their faces hard and suspicious. At their head stood a tall, muscular woman with fiery red hair and piercing green eyes. She held a plasma rifle at the ready, her finger poised on the trigger. "I am Zara Krell, leader of the Daxamite exiles," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "You have entered our sanctuary without permission. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't blast you back into the void." Bailey stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "We mean you no harm," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "We are here because we need your help." Zara's eyes narrowed, her grip tightening on her weapon. "And why should we help you, human? Your kind has brought nothing but war and destruction to the galaxy." Zahn moved to stand beside Bailey, his expression solemn. "Because we are not your enemies," he said. "We are all victims of the Cortex, the true architects of the Genesis Initiative. They have manipulated and enslaved countless species, including our own." He gestured to the rescued prisoners, their bodies still bearing the scars of the Cortex's experiments. "Look at what they have done to these people, to your own kind. We are fighting to stop them, to free the galaxy from their twisted schemes." Zara's gaze flickered to the prisoners, a flicker of sympathy passing over her face. She lowered her weapon but kept it at the ready. "And what do you want from us?" she asked, her tone still guarded. Dr. Valek stepped forward, his voice hoarse and strained. "I have developed a way to reverse the genetic modifications inflicted by the Cortex," he said. "But I need specialized equipment and a safe place to work. Your base may be our only hope." Zara considered his words, her brow furrowed in thought. She turned to Bailey and Zahn, her eyes searching their faces for any sign of deceit. "You speak of a great threat to the galaxy," she said at last. "If what you say is true, then the Cortex must be stopped. We will help you, but on one condition." Bailey nodded, bracing himself for her demand. "And what is that?" "You must share with us all the information you have gathered on the Genesis Initiative," Zara said, her voice firm and unyielding. "If we are to fight this enemy, we must know everything about them." Bailey and Zahn agreed, knowing that they would need all the allies they could get in the battles to come. As they followed Zara and her warriors into the heart of the asteroid base, Dr. Vex began the painstaking process of setting up his equipment and examining the rescued prisoners. Over the next few days, Bailey and Zahn worked closely with Zara and her people, sharing their knowledge of the Cortex's tactics and technology. They trained together, humans and Daxamites alike, honing their skills and forging bonds of trust and respect. But even as they prepared for the inevitable confrontation with the Cortex, Bailey couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. He knew that the enemy would not rest until they had reclaimed their lost experiments and silenced those who threatened to expose their secrets. As he looked out over the asteroid base, watching the Daxamite exiles and his own people working side by side, Bailey felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had come so far, sacrificed so much, but they could not stop now. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and they would fight to the bitter end to protect it. In the heart of the hidden asteroid base, Dr. Vex worked tirelessly to reverse the horrific genetic modifications inflicted upon the rescued prisoners. His brow furrowed in concentration as he pored over the complex Cortex gene sequences, searching for the key to undoing their twisted manipulations. Meanwhile, Bailey and Zahn led scouting missions into the nearby star systems, their ships slipping silently through the void as they searched for any signs of Cortex activity. They knew that every moment spent waiting was another moment the Cortex had to further their sinister experiments. During one such mission, Bailey's sensors picked up a faint Cortex transmission. He leaned forward in his seat, his eyes narrowing as he worked to decipher the encrypted signal. "I've got something," he said, his voice tight with tension. "It's a set of coordinates deep in the Zeta Quadrant, and there's a reference to a primary research facility." Zahn's face appeared on the comm screen, his expression grim. "The Zeta Quadrant? That's uncharted territory. If the Cortex have a facility out there, it must be well hidden." Bailey nodded. "The transmission mentions an artificial black hole. If I'm reading this right, the facility is inside the event horizon, protected by the gravitational forces." They knew they had stumbled upon something big, a chance to strike at the heart of the Cortex's operations and uncover the secrets of the Genesis Initiative. But infiltrating a facility hidden within a black hole would be no easy feat. Back at the base, Bailey and Zahn pored over the stolen Cortex data, searching for any weaknesses they could exploit. They studied the schematics of the research station, memorizing every airlock, every power conduit, every potential entry point. Zara, the fierce leader of the Daxamite outcasts, joined them in the planning. Her eyes glinted with the promise of vengeance as she studied the holographic projections. "My warriors are ready," she said, her voice steady and strong. "We have waited centuries for a chance to strike back at the Cortex. We will not fail." Together, they devised a plan, a daring infiltration that would require all their skills and resources. They would approach the black hole in a specially modified stealth ship equipped with advanced gravity nullifiers and radiation shields. Once inside, they would split into teams, each with a specific target. Bailey, Zahn, and Zara would lead the main assault, fighting their way to the heart of the facility and the secrets it contained. The other teams would sabotage key systems, sowing chaos and disruption to cover their advance. As the plan took shape, Bailey felt a growing sense of anticipation mixed with dread. He knew that they were about to embark on their most dangerous mission yet, a plunge into the unknown from which they might never return. But he also knew that they had no choice. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and the key to stopping the Cortex lay within that artificial black hole, waiting to be uncovered. The infiltration team gathered in the hangar bay, their faces set with grim determination. They boarded the stealth ship, a sleek black vessel bristling with advanced technology. Bailey and Zahn took their positions in the cockpit, their hands flying over the controls as they prepared for launch. With a low hum of power, the ship lifted off, gliding out of the hangar and into the star-studded void. They set course for the Zeta Quadrant, for the hidden black hole, and the nightmarish research facility within. As they approached the anomaly, the ship began to shudder, the hull groaning under the immense gravitational stresses. Bailey gritted his teeth, fighting to keep the vessel on course as warning lights flashed across the console. Debris and stellar fragments swirled around them, each one a deadly projectile that could tear through their shields like tissue paper. Zahn worked frantically to plot a safe path through the maelstrom, his fingers dancing across the navigation controls. Slowly, painfully, they made their way to the event horizon, the point of no return. Bailey's heart pounded in his chest as they crossed the threshold, the ship plunging into the inky darkness of the black hole. Inside, the facility was a nightmare made manifest, with strange, twisted creatures floating in containment tanks, the products of the Cortex's genetic experimentation. Bailey and his team battled their way through the halls, their weapons flashing in the eerie dim light. At every turn, they encountered resistance. Cortex guards, automated defense systems, and monstrosities that defied description. But they pressed on, driven by a desperate need to uncover the truth. In the heart of the facility, they found the central laboratory, a vast chamber filled with pulsing machinery and glowing tanks. And there, waiting for them, was Nexus Prime, the mastermind behind the Cortex's experiments. The alien scientist regarded them with cold, dispassionate eyes, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You have come far, but you are too late," he said. "The Genesis Initiative is nearing its culmination, and soon the Cortex will have what we have always sought. The perfect life form, the ultimate expression of genetic potential." Bailey raised his weapon, his finger tightening on the trigger. "We won't let that happen, Nexus Prime. Your experiments end here." But Nexus Prime laughed, a chilling sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You cannot stop what has already begun," he said. "Even now, my greatest creation is nearing completion, a being that will embody the strengths of 1,000 species." Bailey, Zon, and Zara charged into the heart of the Cortex facility, weapons blazing. Genetically engineered monstrosities lunged at them from every side, their twisted forms a nightmarish fusion of flesh and technology. The air crackled with energy as the team fought their way deeper into the complex, the ground slick with the blood of fallen abominations. In the central chamber, they confronted Nexus Prime, the mastermind behind the Cortex's experiments. The alien scientist regarded them with cold, dispassionate eyes, its body a grotesque patchwork of cybernetic enhancements and genetic modifications. "I cannot stop the inevitable," Nexus Prime intoned, its voice a discordant chorus of 1,000 stolen lives. "The Genesis Initiative will reshape the galaxy in our image, and you will be the first to fall." With a gesture, Nexus Prime summoned its most powerful creations, towering amalgamations of the galaxy's deadliest predators, their bodies bristling with advanced weaponry. The battle was joined, a whirlwind of claws, blades, and searing energy beams. Zara fought like a woman possessed, her centuries of exile fueling her rage and determination. But even her skill and strength were not enough against the sheer number and power of Nexus Prime's creations. A searing energy bolt caught Zara in the chest, burning through her armor and searing her flesh. She stumbled, her weapons clattering to the floor. Seeing Zara's plight, Zon hesitated for a split second. The Daxamite warrior had grown to respect and admire the fierce outcast leader, and the thought of losing her tore at his heart. But he also knew that if Nexus Prime escaped with its research, the galaxy would be doomed. With a roar of anguish and fury, Zon leapt at Nexus Prime. His blades flashing in a deadly arc, Bailey joined the fray, his weapons spitting death into the ranks of the abominations. Together, they drove Nexus Prime back, their attacks growing more desperate and ferocious with each passing moment. In a final desperate gambit, Nexus Prime lunged at the central control console, its fingers flying over the holographic interface. The facility shuddered, the containment fields around its most dangerous experiments flickering and failing. "If I cannot have the galaxy," Nexus Prime snarled, "then I will watch it burn." Bailey and Zon redoubled their efforts, fighting their way through the tide of abominations. They reached the control console, their weapons tearing into Nexus Prime's cybernetic form. The alien scientist crumpled, its body a wreck of sparking circuitry and leaking fluids, but the damage was already done. Nexus Prime's final command had overloaded the facility's power core, setting off a chain reaction of destabilization. "We have to go," Bailey shouted over the blaring alarms. "This whole place is going to blow." Zon knelt beside Zara, cradling her broken form in his arms. The outcast leader looked up at him, her eyes filled with pain and grim determination. "Leave me," she rasped, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "Get out while you still can." Zon hesitated, torn between his duty and his heart, but Zara gripped his arm, her fingers leaving bloody streaks on his armor. "Go," she whispered. "Finish what we started." With a final agonized look, Zon gently laid Zara down and turned to Bailey. The two warriors fought their way back through the crumbling facility, dodging falling debris and exploding machinery. They burst out of the complex just as the power core detonated, the shockwave hurling them through the void. The black hole research facility tore itself apart, consumed by a maelstrom of twisted metal and unstable energy. Battered, bleeding, and barely conscious, Bailey and Zon dragged themselves into their waiting shuttle. They watched through the viewports as the facility collapsed in on itself, the black hole's gravity well distorting and swallowing the wreckage. With heavy hearts, they set a course back to the asteroid base, the weight of their losses and the magnitude of their discovery pressing down on them like a physical force. Upon their return, they found Dr. Vex waiting for them, his face lined with exhaustion, but also with a glimmer of hope. "I've done it," Dr. Vex said, his voice trembling with excitement and trepidation. "I've created a serum that can reverse the cortex's genetic modifications, but also grant enhanced abilities to those who receive it." He held up a vial of shimmering liquid, its contents swirling with a kaleidoscope of colors. "With this, we could create an army of enhanced warriors capable of standing against the cortex and their abominations." Bailey and Zahn exchanged a look, the implications of Dr. Vex's discovery sinking in. The power to undo the cortex's twisted experiments and turn their own weapons against them was tempting, but also terrifying. The serum was untested, its long-term effects unknown, and the idea of creating yet another army of genetically enhanced soldiers sat uneasily with them. Before they could come to a decision, the base's alarms blared to life. The sensors had detected a massive cortex fleet dropping out of hyperspace, its ships already moving into attack formation. Bailey and Zahn rushed to the command center, their minds racing. The base's defenses were formidable, but against the full might of the Cortex Armada, they would be little more than a speed bump. As the first wave of enemy ships opened fire, the base's shields flickered and strained under the onslaught. Explosions rocked the asteroid, sending tremors through the ancient rock. Bailey and Zahn looked at each other, the weight of the moment hanging between them. They had come so far, sacrificed so much, but now, with the Cortex at their doorstep and the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance, they faced their greatest challenge yet. They knew that whatever choice they made, whatever path they took, the consequences would be felt for generations to come. The future of humanity, of the Daxamites, of every species touched by the Genesis Initiative, rested on their shoulders. With grim determination, they turned to face the oncoming storm, ready to make their final stand against the forces that threatened to consume everything they held dear. In the heart of the besieged asteroid base, Bailey and Zahn stared at the vial of shimmering serum, their faces etched with grim determination. They knew the risks, the untold dangers of injecting an untested experimental substance into their bodies. However, with the Cortex forces closing in, their options were severely limited. "Do we have to do this?" Bailey said, his voice steady despite the weight of the decision. "It's our only chance." Zahn nodded, his jaw set. "We've come too far to back down now. Whatever happens, we face it together." They gathered their most skilled warriors, a mix of humans and Daxamites united by a common purpose. One by one, they stepped forward, rolling up their sleeves and presenting their arms. Dr. Vex administered the serum, his hands shaking slightly as he pressed the injector against their skin. The effect was immediate. Bailey felt a surge of energy coursing through his veins, his muscles tightening and his senses sharpening. Beside him, Zahn let out a low growl, his eyes flashing with newfound power. The enhanced warriors moved with blinding speed, their reflexes and strength pushed beyond human limits. They grabbed their weapons and charged out of the base, ready to meet the Cortex head-on. The battle was joined in a clash of fire and fury. The Cortex soldiers, their bodies twisted by genetic manipulation, swarmed forward with inhuman ferocity. But Bailey and his team met them blow for blow, their enhanced abilities more than a match for the alien abominations. Bailey ducked under a slashing claw, his fist slamming into the Cortex soldier's midsection. The creature doubled over, its exoskeleton cracking under the force of the blow. Zahn leaped over a barrage of plasma fire, his blades flashing as he cut through the enemy ranks. The asteroid's rocky surface became a hellish battlefield, the ground slick with blood and strewn with broken bodies. The air crackled with the exchange of weapons fire and the screams of the dying. But even with their enhanced abilities, Bailey and his team were badly outnumbered. The Cortex forces seemed endless, a tide of monstrous flesh and metal that threatened to overwhelm them. Just as despair began to set in, Bailey's comms crackled to life. The Daxamite leader's voice filled his ear, steady and resolute. "Hold fast, my friends," the leader said. "You are not alone in this fight. Even now, ships from a dozen worlds are converging on your position. Together, we will drive the Cortex back and put an end to their twisted ambitions." Bailey's heart soared at the news. He turned to his warriors, his voice ringing out over the chaos of battle. "You hear that?" he shouted. "We've got reinforcements on the way. All we have to do is hold the line." With renewed vigor, the enhanced warriors threw themselves into the fray. They fought with the strength of heroes, their every blow a testament to the unbreakable spirit of free species across the galaxy. With the Cortex forces in disarray and their own ranks bolstered by the power of Dr. Vex's serum, Bailey and Zahn saw their chance to strike at the heart of the alien threat. They gathered a small strike team of their most skilled and trusted warriors, each one enhanced by the serum's incredible effects. The team boarded a sleek, heavily armed shuttle and set course for the Cortex command ship, a massive, forbidding vessel that hung in the void like a predator waiting to strike. As they approached, the ship's defenses came to life, filling the space around them with a hail of plasma fire and pulsing energy beams. Bailey and Zahn's enhanced reflexes and heightened senses allowed them to pilot the shuttle through the deadly barrage, weaving and dodging with incredible speed and precision. They returned fire with the shuttle's own weapons, punching through the command ship's shields and blasting smoking holes in its armored hull. With a final, desperate maneuver, they brought the shuttle in close and breached the ship's airlock, spilling out into the dimly lit corridors beyond. The strike team moved quickly and silently, their enhanced speed and strength allowing them to overpower the Cortex guards and automated defenses that stood in their way. They fought their way deeper into the ship, navigating the twisted, pulsing corridors towards the heart of the vessel, where they knew the Cortex High Council would be waiting. These council members were ancient and immensely powerful beings, their true forms hidden within the genetically modified bodies of their slaves. As Bailey and Zahn burst into the council chamber, they found themselves face to face with the Cortex leaders, their twisted, monstrous forms looming over them like nightmarish gods. The strike team opened fire, their weapons spitting plasma and searing energy, but the council members seemed to absorb the blows as if they were nothing. The Cortex leaders lashed out with their psychic powers, their vast alien intellects crushing down on the minds of the strike team like a physical weight. Bailey and Zahn staggered under the assault, their enhanced minds straining to resist the overwhelming force of the Council's attack. But they refused to give in, drawing on the power of Dr. Vex's serum and their own indomitable wills to push back against the psychic onslaught. They clashed with the Council members on the mental plane, reality itself warping and twisting around them as they struggled for dominance. It was a battle unlike any they had ever faced before, a war of minds and wills that threatened to tear their very sanity apart. The strike team fought with everything they had, their minds and bodies pushed to the very limits of their enhanced abilities. Just as it seemed that all hope was lost, that the Council's psychic might would overwhelm them utterly, a miracle happened. The reinforcements promised by the Sire Father arrived, a vast armada of ships from a dozen different species, all united in their determination to end the Cortex threat once and for all. The sudden appearance of the Allied fleet turned the tide of the battle, catching the Cortex forces off guard and allowing Bailey and Zahn to press their advantage with renewed vigor. They redoubled their assault on the Council members, their minds linked by the power of Dr. Vex's serum. In a final desperate act of defiance, the Cortex High Council attempted to unleash a devastating psychic shockwave, a blast of mental energy that would destroy the minds of every living thing in the star system. Bailey and Zahn felt the shockwave building, felt the Council members drawing on every last ounce of their psychic might. But they were ready for it. Linked by the serum's power, their minds acting as one, Bailey and Zahn reached out and seized control of the shockwave, redirecting it back at the Council members with all the force they could muster. The Cortex leaders screamed in agony as their own psychic attack tore through their minds, ripping apart their consciousness and leaving only shattered remnants behind. With the Council destroyed, the Cortex forces fell into disarray, their slave armies bereft of the psychic control that had held them in thrall for so long. The Allied fleet swept through the system, mopping up the last pockets of resistance and freeing the countless species that had been enslaved by the Cortex's cruel regime. Bailey and Zahn stood on the bridge of the Cortex command ship, watching as the last of the alien vessels fled into the void. They knew that the war was far from over, that there were still many battles to be fought and many secrets to uncover. But for now, they could savor the sweet taste of victory, the knowledge that they had struck a blow against the Cortex that would be felt across the galaxy. With the Cortex High Command shattered, Bailey and Zahn led the Allied forces in a galaxy-spanning campaign of liberation. They struck at the heart of the Cortex's power, targeting their most heavily fortified strongholds and research facilities. On the industrial world of Car Prime, Bailey spearheaded an assault on a massive Cortex factory complex, his enhanced reflexes and strength allowing him to dodge incoming fire and tear through the enemy's defenses like they were made of paper. He guided his strike team deep into the depths of the facility, strategically planting explosives at key structural points. As the charges detonated, The factory collapsed in on itself, burying the Cortex's twisted genetic experiments and their cruel overseers beneath tons of rubble. The enslaved workers, finally free of Cortex control, wept with joy as Bailey and his team led them to safety on the jungle planet of Verdox. Meanwhile, Zahn infiltrated a heavily guarded Cortex research outpost, leveraging his intimate knowledge of Cortex security protocols. Skillfully slipping past their perimeter defenses, he made his way to the central data core. There, he unearthed a trove of information on the Cortex's origins and the true extent of their genetic manipulations. Shockingly, the data revealed that the Cortex had not always been the masters of the Genesis Initiative, but were once slaves themselves, created and controlled by a mysterious race known as the progenitors. Zahn's mind reeled at the implications. If the Cortex were mere pawns in a larger cosmic game, then the threat to the galaxy's freedom was far greater than anyone had imagined. After downloading the data, he fought his way back out of the compound, his enhanced speed and agility enabling him to evade the Cortex security forces. As Bailey and Zahn liberated world after world, they began to unravel the true nature of the progenitors and their cosmic schemes. It appeared that these enigmatic beings had been manipulating the evolution of life in the galaxy for eons, guiding the development of countless species for their own inscrutable purposes. The Cortex, despite their cruelty and twisted experiments, were merely the latest in a long line of slave races created and discarded by the progenitors as part of some vast, incomprehensible plan. The realization filled Bailey and Zahn with dread. If the progenitors were the true masters of the Genesis Initiative, then the galaxy's newfound freedom might be nothing more than an illusion, a brief respite before the next phase of the cosmic game began. Amidst grappling with this revelation, a distress signal pierced through the static on their comm channels, originating from an uncharted system on the fringes of known space. Bailey and Zahn shared a look of grim determination. They couldn't ignore this plea for help, not when the fate of the entire galaxy might hang in the balance. Gathering a small team of their most trusted allies, warriors and scientists, they embarked on their ship towards the unknown system, feeling the weight of their most perilous mission yet. As their ship descended through the turbulent atmosphere of the uncharted world, they beheld the horrific devastation that lay before them. The planet's surface was a nightmarish landscape of shattered cities and scorched earth, remnants of a war that had raged on a scale beyond comprehension. Following the distress signal, they arrived at a massive crater, seemingly carved out by some immense force. At the crater's bottom, a hidden door ground open, revealing a tunnel that led deep into the planet's crust. Bailey and Zahn exchanged a weary glance before stepping into the tunnel, weapons at the ready. The air grew colder as they descended, the walls lined with strange pulsing technology that seemed to hum with an almost living energy. At last, they emerged into a vast underground city, its towering spires and glittering domes untouched by the destruction above. A delegation of Ziri, tall and slender beings with luminous eyes and skin shimmering with an inner light, greeted them with a mixture of hope and desperation. "Welcome, friends from the stars," the Zephi leader said, her voice a melodic whisper echoing in their minds. "We have waited long for this day, for the chance to strike back against the progenitors and their genetic tyranny." As Bailey and Zahn listened, the Ziri shared their tragic history of once being a thriving galactic power until they refused to submit to the progenitors' twisted experiments. The progenitors had unleashed a plague upon the Ziri, a genetically engineered virus that decimated their population and forced them into hiding. "But we have not been idle in our exile," the leader said, her eyes flashing with determination. "We have labored in secret to create a weapon that can undo the progenitors' foul manipulations, a device that can rewrite the very code of life itself." She led them to a vast laboratory where a pulsing, glowing core hovered in a containment field. "This is the heart of the weapon," she explained, "but it is incomplete. The components needed to power it have been scattered across the galaxy, hidden in places where only the bravest and most skilled can reach them." Bailey and Zahn knew they had no choice but to accept this challenge. The fate of the galaxy and every species that called it home hung in the balance. They gathered their crew and set out on a desperate scavenger hunt, racing against time and the progenitors' forces to collect the weapon components. Their first target was a derelict space station orbiting the event horizon of a supermassive black hole. Once a research outpost of the progenitors, it had long since been abandoned, its secrets left to be swallowed by the hungry void. As they approached the station, Bailey and Zahn's ship was set upon by a swarm of progenitor drones, sleek insectoid forms darting and weaving through the void with unnatural grace. The crew fought back fiercely, their weapons tearing through the drones' chitinous hides. Yet, As they fought, more drones poured out of the station's airlocks, an endless tide of alien metal and malice. Bailey and Zahn knew they couldn't hold out forever. They needed to get inside the station and find the component before the progenitor's reinforcements arrived. With a final desperate push, they blasted their way through the drone swarm and docked with the station. The airlock doors hissed open, revealing a nightmarish labyrinth of twisted corridors and pulsing organic technology. As they fought deeper into the station, Bailey couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something ancient and unspeakably evil was lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. But he pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the mission at hand, on the fate of the galaxy resting on their shoulders. They found the component in the heart of the station, a glowing, pulsing orb that hummed with an eerie, almost living energy. But as they reached out to take it, a monstrous form emerged from the shadows, a progenitor-created abomination that seemed to be a fusion of flesh and metal. Its body was a grotesque patchwork of a dozen different species. The creature lunged at them, its razor-sharp claws tearing through the air with blinding speed. Bailey and Zahn met its charge head-on, their weapons flashing as they fought to keep the monster at bay. It was a battle unlike any they had faced before, a desperate, brutal struggle against a foe that seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. But through sheer grit and determination, they managed to bring the creature down, its twisted body dissolving into a puddle of steaming ichor. With the component in hand, they raced back to their ship, the station collapsing around them as the black hole's gravity well began to tear it apart. They barely made it out alive. The shock wave from the station's destruction buffeted their ship as they fled into the void. But even as they caught their breath, Bailey and Zahn knew that this was only the beginning. There were still more components to find, more battles to be fought, and the progenitor's forces would be more determined than ever to stop them. As they set course for their next target, a dying star on the edge of known space, Bailey couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. But trap or not, they had no choice but to press on. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and they would not rest until the progenitor's hold on it was broken once and for all. With the final components in hand, Bailey, Zahn, and their team raced back to the Zephyr's hidden stronghold. Dr. Vex and the Zephy scientists worked feverishly to assemble the reality-altering weapon, their hands shaking with a mix of excitement and trepidation. As the last piece slotted into place, the weapon hummed to life, its surface shimmering with otherworldly energy. Dr. Vex stepped back, his eyes wide with awe and terror. "It's incredible," he breathed. "The progenitor's technology is beyond anything we've ever seen. This device, it could reshape the very foundations of the universe." Bailey and Zahn exchanged a grim look. They had fought too hard, lost too much, to let the progenitors wield such godlike power. "We can't let them get their hands on this," Bailey said, his voice hard with determination. "We have to end this once and for all." The team gathered around a holographic display, studying the schematics of the progenitor megastructure. The vast artificial world was a labyrinth of twisted corridors and pulsing energy conduits, each one leading to the central chamber where the progenitor overlords held court. "We'll have to fight our way through their armies," Zahn said, his eyes tracing the route to the center. "But with the Zeph weapon, we might just stand a chance." The Allied fleet assembled in orbit, a motley collection of ships from a dozen different species. The Sire Father stood on the bridge of the flagship, his face lined with worry and resolve. "Today, we fight not just for our own survival, but for the fate of the entire universe," he said, his voice ringing out across the fleet. "Let us show the progenitors the true strength of the free peoples of the galaxy." As one, the fleet tore open a rift in the fabric of space, plunging through the swirling vortex towards the heart of the progenitor's domain. The progenitor megastructure loomed before them, a twisted mass of alien geometry and pulsing energy. The fleet came under fire immediately, the progenitor's defenses tearing through shields and hull plating like paper. Ships exploded into clouds of debris, the screams of the dying filling the comms. But the Allies pushed forward, their weapons blazing as they carved a path through the progenitor lines. Bailey and Zahn led the charge, the Zeph weapon pulsing in their hands. They fought their way to the surface of the megastructure, a nightmarish landscape of jutting spires and writhing organic growths. The ground beneath their feet shifted and warped, reality itself bending to the progenitor's will. Progenitor-created abominations surged forth to meet them, their twisted forms defying description. Zephy energy blasts and Daxamite plasma fire tore through their ranks, but still they came on, an endless tide of nightmares made flesh. Bailey and Zahn pressed forward, the Zephyr weapon guiding them through the chaos. They could feel the device resonating with the megastructure's reality-altering energies, the two technologies locked in a battle for dominance. At last, they reached the heart of the megastructure, a vast chamber that pulsed with a sickly, otherworldly light. The progenitor overlords awaited them, their forms shifting and flowing like liquid energy. Foolish primitives. The overlords hissed, their voices a discordant chorus that echoed in the mind rather than the ears. You think you can stand against the masters of reality itself? Bailey raised the Zephyr weapon, the device thrumming with power. We've come too far to turn back now, he growled. Your reign of terror ends here. The battle was joined, a psychic maelstrom that tore at the very fabric of existence. The progenitors unleashed the full might of their reality-warping powers, the chamber dissolving into a kaleidoscope of impossible shapes and mind-shattering colors. But Bailey and Zahn held fast, the Zephyr weapon anchoring them to the shreds of reality. They poured their will into the device, focusing its power on the progenitor overlords. The overlords screamed as the weapon's energies enveloped them, their forms rippling and distorting as they were forced back into the constraints of physical existence. Their powers diminished, their godlike might stripped away. The progenitors were suddenly vulnerable, mortal. Bailey and Zahn pressed their advantage, their allies surging forward to join the fray. Zephyri energy blades and Daxamite plasma swords clashed against progenitor flesh, the once immortal beings falling before the onslaught. But even as the progenitor overlords fell, the megastructure itself began to come apart, unable to sustain itself without the reality-bending energies of its masters. The ground heaved and buckled, vast sections of the structure collapsing into the void. Bailey and Zahn fought their way back to the surface, their allies falling one by one as the megastructure disintegrated around them. Ships were swallowed by yawning chasms of nothingness, the screams of the dying echoing across the comms. At last, they reached the outer limits of the megastructure, the final barrier between them and the void. But even as they prepared to make their escape, a chilling realization struck them like a thunderbolt. The progenitor's final act of defiance was already in motion. A chain reaction had begun, one that would tear the megastructure apart and unleash a reality-warping shockwave across the galaxy. Every species, every world, every atom would be reshaped according to the progenitor's twisted design. Bailey and Zahn exchanged a look of grim understanding. There was only one way to stop the shockwave, to save the galaxy from an eternity of genetic slavery. The Zuri weapon pulsed in their hands, its power thrumming through their enhanced bodies. They knew what they had to do. Get to the ship, Bailey ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos raging around them. Get our people out of here. What about you? One of the soldiers asked, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. We're staying, Zahn said, his grip tightening on the weapon. We have to stop the shockwave. The soldier hesitated for a moment, then snapped off a salute. He turned and raced towards the waiting escape ship, shouting for the others to follow. Bailey and Zahn watched as their friends and allies boarded the ship, their faces etched with a mixture of grief and determination. They knew that they were leaving their leaders behind, but they also knew that they had to carry on the fight to ensure that their sacrifice would not be in vain. As the escape ship blasted away from the megastructure, Bailey and Zahn turned to face the oncoming shockwave. The Zephyri weapon glowed with an inner light, its power building to a crescendo. They shared one final look, a silent acknowledgement of all they had been through together, of the bond that had been forged in the crucible of war and sacrifice. Then, as one, they activated the weapon, pouring all of their will and strength into its reality-altering matrix. A blinding burst of energy erupted from the weapon, a searing lance of pure power that pierced the heart of the shockwave. Bailey and Zahn felt the weapon's energy coursing through them, fusing with their very essence, transforming them into something beyond human or Daxamite. They became the focal point of the weapon's power, the conduit through which the shockwave's energy was absorbed and redirected. Their bodies dissolved into pure light, their consciousness expanding to encompass the entire galaxy. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, they saw everything, felt everything. They were the stars and the planets, the dust and the radiation. They were the lifeblood of the galaxy itself. And then, with a final shattering burst of energy, the shockwave was gone. Its power dissipated into the cosmic background radiation. The megastructure imploded, collapsing in on itself like a dying star. But even as the structure crumbled into nothingness, Bailey and Zahn remained, their essence infused into the very fabric of the galaxy. They had become the guardians of the new reality, the shepherds of the free species of the cosmos. As the Allied fleet regrouped and began the long process of rebuilding, the legend of Bailey and Zon spread like wildfire. Their names became a rallying cry, a symbol of the unbreakable spirit that had driven the galaxy to throw off the shackles of genetic oppression. In every corner of the galaxy, people whispered their story, passing it down from generation to generation. It was the tale of the human and the Daxamite who had given everything to save the future, who had transcended their mortal forms to become the eternal guardians of freedom and self-determination. If you appreciated this story and wish to show your support, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Additionally, for each comment containing 88, I will heart every single one. Thank you for your time.